Generally, calm people have read it. What made you completely lose it that time? My old roommate. I worked out of town with our other roommate, now my husband, from Monday to Friday. He gave us a sob story about how his last roommate kicked him out for no reason, and how his parents were always arguing with him so he couldn't move back home. We had just begun our search for a new roommate, since my husband's lease was ending in about a month or so, and my dad had just kicked me out of the house for having adult sleepovers at 22. Big mistake. I'd never lived with anyone before, so I wanted to make sure I was the perfect roommate. I made homemade wine and shared it, keeping at least 30 bottles stocked at almost all times, along with a full winemaking kit. I did their laundry. We gave him an old mattress and the furniture my husband was planning to throw out while moving to our new place. We shared our groceries with him and made plans to split common costs for things like toilet paper, utilities, and cleaning supplies. We supplied all the furniture, decor, and cooking supplies in the common areas. We only asked that he not have intimate relations on our communal couch with his girlfriends, and that he avoid bothering the neighbors with his drum kit, which a friend had given him because he planned to donate it. I didn't think we were being particular, and I cooked most weekends and hosted a party almost every weekend. We also said no hard drugs and no dealing out of the house. We were not into that and didn't want it around us. He told us he did stuffs at raves occasionally, so I figured it was better to set that boundary early. We also wanted to be respectful to the neighbors, since it was a middle townhouse. The highlights. He used entire blocks of cheese to make cheese sauce and left it sitting on the stove all weekend for us to come home and clean. He got barbecue sauce on the ceiling and never cleaned it. He broke the dishwasher by putting a wooden spoon face up in it and refused to fix it. We later learned his last roommate kicked him out for being a nightmare, and in response, he defecated in the middle of the floor when he moved out. He told us this while laughing, and I was immediately horrified. When we were kicking him out, I also learned he had intimate relations on a basement pool table while staying at his friend's parents' house. He put dirty dishes in cupboards and whole chicken bones in the dishwasher because he was too lazy to clear his plate. We kept a communal change drawer for pizza or unexpected costs. He took the tin and stabbed it with a knife because he had blown all his money on booze, drugs, and raves every weekend. He lost his license for 1 year because of a DUI, but that didn't stop him from driving drunk, uninsured, or unregistered, which I learned after the big blow-up. He felt entitled to everything we had without contributing. He put greasy oil pans on our vintage white leather bar stools. I had to scrub the stains out, and he thought I was rude for being upset. He started wearing my husband's clothes and footwear, even taking them warm from the dryer. It took us a couple of months to notice because we were too polite to ask. My husband had broken a lace on one of his skater shoes and kept forgetting to replace it. The roommate patched the laces together and adopted the shoes. We finally noticed when he walked out of the house wearing them right in front of us. He convinced my husband to get a miniature pig. We agreed on the condition that it was his pet and he would handle its care, wood chips for its bathroom area, training, walks, and feeding. He fed it bacon. When he ran out of wood chips, he scooped sand from the park and used that instead. The pig kicked it everywhere, and within a week, the entire kitchen and living room had become its toilet. He proudly bragged about how he was saving money. We eventually rehomed the pig since we were out of town 5 days a week. We later found out it was not a miniature pig at all, was expected to reach about 400 pounds, and wasn't even legal to have in the city. We came home a day early from working out of town and walked in on him with his latest fling on our communal couch. Cue meltdown. We also came home to the neighbor threatening to beat the crap out of us for being too loud on a weekday. Apparently, our roommate had been playing drums until 2 or 3 in the morning. When we asked him, he denied it. We told him we would inform the neighbor that we were out of town during the week, and if he didn't stop, we would let the neighbor into the house to deal with him ourselves. I assumed he stopped because we never heard another complaint. He drank all my homemade wine and any liquor he could get his hands on when we were gone. He never restocked the beer fridge. He smoked all my weed and never bought more. It escalated to the point where, when he ran out, he would crawl around the carpet searching for any crumbs he might have dropped. One time, we came home to his mother, frantically knocking on the door with groceries for him. This had been arranged only a few hours earlier, but in that time, he had become so drunk and high that he was face down on the floor. We helped her unload the groceries while he got mad at her for being upset. I visited his parents' house a few months in, since he did not have a car, and I offered him a ride. His parents were calm and kind. I mentioned they did not seem too bad, and he said, "Yeah, but I don't like taking women home, and it's awkward when they leave in the morning." He dealt drugs out of our house and hid them in his guitar case in the communal basement, even though he knew I played guitar. I found out when a friend visiting from overseas noticed him leaving the house to meet cars and returning with money. She snooped, found the pills, and snitched immediately. The final blow-up happened when we came home to a flooded house because he was too broke, too cheap, and too drunk to buy toilet paper, and ended up clogging everything with paper towels. I have never been as angry as I was in that moment. I don't even know what I said. I was so furious I couldn't yell. I just escalated slowly, using that super serious, quiet, raging gas leak voice I inherited from my dad. Bone-chilling, the kind that ends souls, as I listed every reason he was a piece of crap and told him that if he didn't find a new place to live within the month, I would make his entire reality a nightmare. He moved out quietly, did not defile the carpet, and we found a new, better roommate. Story 2. It has always felt like my parents never wanted me. I was a surprise honeymoon baby, born 9 months and 1 day after their wedding. I was regularly screamed at for anything I did until I just started hiding. I was called the practice child my whole life, while my younger siblings received far more love and attention. In my teens, they began taking in strays. If any neighborhood kids didn't want to go home, they could just stay at our house all the time. Effectively, my mother would take my friends away from me to be her friends instead, one of whom had been picking on me constantly since I was 11. I guess they had that in common. That guy was kicked out of both his father's and his mother's houses when he was 20, so my parents took him in permanently. That crushed me. But I always wanted their approval, so I stayed calm and agreeable, desperately trying to figure out how to earn their love, and went along with it. Years later, I'm married and have a son. That same man still lives with my parents. They continue to coddle him and make excuses while criticizing me for whatever they feel like. One day, we were all at my parents' house, and my son, a goofy 2-year-old, was being himself. It annoyed the man-child living there. He got furious, picked my son up by the ankle, and spanked him. My parents claimed not to have seen it. We went home. I couldn't sleep that night because I was so upset. The next morning, I made sure the guy and my mom would be home, and why wouldn't he be? And went to confront them with my wife. I unloaded everything I'd been putting up with for about an hour, including asking how my mom could allow this jerk to hit my son. She insisted it didn't happen, and I went through the roof. I ended up crying from all the pent-up emotion, and my fantastic wife took over. She said we wouldn't be coming back if he still lived there. He yelled that he would move out and stormed off, saying he didn't have to listen to this. Shortly after we left, my parents convinced him not to move. My mother's big takeaway from all of it? That I didn't come to have a conversation, but only to dump on them. That I wasn't being fair to them. We went to counseling with them later. Months of it. It validated everything I had felt, but they never stopped lying or being defensive. One counselor even said we should be on Dr. Phil. Another said my mom is incapable of empathy. Both called my parents delusional. Of course, they didn't take any of it seriously. At one point, my dad asked me, "Who does he think he is to judge us like that?" As if he forgot that that's their job. I haven't spoken with them in almost a year, and life is so much better. Story 3. My brother and I played travel sports for a few seasons as kids. On one trip, I was at the pool with some of his teammates, messing around in the water when the coach's kid started being a jerk, as usual. My brother was one of the smaller kids on the team, so the coach's son would pick on him constantly. Most of the other kids disliked the coach's son but stayed silent so they wouldn't be next. That day, he thought it would be funny to pick up my brother's drink right in front of him and spit into it. My dad had taught me from a young age not to let anyone mess with my brother or sister, so I got seriously pissed. I took a running start and shoulder-checked him into the pool. Since he had just arrived, he hadn't taken his clothes off yet, and he started crying because his phone and iPod got ruined. He literally ran out yelling, "I'm telling my dad." It backfired for him, though. Everyone stuck up for my brother, and the coach was furious to find out what a terrible kid his son had been. The coach's son ended up being the only one in trouble. Story 4. A lady came to the shelter to see the cats. She asked if she could give them treats, and I said yes. Most of the cats are free, so it wasn't an issue. She got the bag out, and the cats got wild with anticipation, but she just stood there laughing and teasing them without actually giving them anything. She seemed to enjoy their anxiety, and her laugh sounded completely unhinged. I lost it, grabbed the bag from her, gave the cats their treats, and asked her to leave. These cats are already stressed. There's no need to make them more anxious. Story 5. I can remember that day like it was yesterday. I was home packing my things to get ready for when my husband finished basic training. I rarely, if ever, raise my voice to anyone. My dad has always had a wicked temper, and my sister had a knack for starting yelling matches with him. One night, she forgot to do something she was supposed to, and the yelling started again. I ignored it until he called her stupid. That got under my skin, so I spoke up saying he shouldn't call her that. He hollered back, "You are my daughters. I can talk to you however I want." That's when I snapped. I saw red for the first time in my life and completely lost it. I screamed about how tired I was of him treating us like garbage when he lost his temper, about how we hid in the back room with my mom until he cooled off, and how all I wanted was to visit my family before moving over 12 hours away. I even told him that if he ever wanted to see me again, he needed to shut up and sit in the corner until he was done throwing a fit. I yelled at him for the first time in my life for a solid 30 minutes. I didn't stop until everything I had been holding in for years was out, and I watched him go from red-faced anger to what seemed like guilt. When I finally stopped, he was silent. He didn't say a word and just walked away. Shortly after I moved out, he went to a doctor and was put on medication to help with his anger issues. Now, he's super friendly, and I haven't heard him throw a tantrum like he used to in over 10 years. He has never spoken poorly to me or my sister since then either. Story 6. This happened in a club ages ago. I was bouncing around on the dance floor with everyone else and apparently stepped on some guy's foot. He had been standing there with a posse of 2 or 3 others, watching people. I shrugged and apologized, then turned to leave. Right then, somebody smacked me in the back of the head. Not hard, but enough to notice. I turned around, still calm, and said something like, "Look, I'm going to walk this way. You guys stay here and nothing more needs to happen." I turned around again and got smacked in the back of the head a second time. At that point, I was really pissed off. It didn't help that they all looked at me like they were innocent, and I couldn't even tell which one of them had done it. So I stuck my finger in the face of the guy whose foot I'd supposedly stepped on and told him he'd better not do it again. Then I turned around once more, basically waiting to get hit again. Instead, they poured a glass of beer down my back. That's when I completely lost it. I spun around and went straight for the guy. I was in full rage mode and didn't care what happened next as long as he suffered for it. The terrified look on his face told me he realized he'd gone too far. His friends didn't even try to help him. After a while, people pulled us apart, and that was the end of it. I have zero sympathy for people who resort to violence to solve their problems, but I don't feel any shame for snapping in that situation. I did everything I could to avoid what eventually happened. Story 7. Earlier this year, my health insurance got messed up. I started making too much money to qualify for my state's Medicare, so healthcare.gov requested a notification from NJ Family Care to confirm I wasn't on it anymore. In January, I called them to get the notification. They said, "Yeah, you should get it in a couple of weeks." It never came. I forgot about it until healthcare.gov sent me a message saying they would raise my insurance costs if I didn't provide the notice within 2 weeks. I called NJ Family Care again and explained the situation. They once again claimed they would send the notice and didn't. After getting an extension from healthcare.gov, I called NJ Family Care once more, politely explaining the situation and requesting the cancellation notice. The woman on the phone got an attitude with me, saying something like, "You know this is the cancellation department, right?" That's when I lost it. "What the hell is your problem? I don't understand why the heck you can't just send me this frigging letter. What's happening over there? Just look in the frigging file and cancel it." "Yes, you bish, I know this is the cancellation department. I want to notice that it's canceled." I must have scared the hell out of her because the next thing she said was, "I'll go get my supervisor," who solved the problem in 10 minutes. I got my cancellation notice 3 days later. Story 8. I worked at a diner with an open kitchen. You could see us and we could see you. I was the only cook during the lunch rush when I heard a lady shout, "Hey, I looked up, and a woman sitting in a booth was pointing at me while doing a very condescending come here motion with her finger. I assumed something was wrong with her food, so I decided I could step out of the kitchen, leaving 4 orders on the grill to see what needed fixing. But she had no food on her table. She held out her blue soda cup and asked, "What is this?" Excuse me? Why is my root beer in a soda cup and not a mug? I don't know. I'm just the coop. Oh, great. Another frigging idiot in this frigging place who doesn't know anything. She proceeded to chew me out for not knowing why the server had given her root beer in a cup. We had special root beer mugs, but the servers couldn't find them. Someone had misplaced them. I apologized and headed back into the kitchen while she loudly talked crap about me to the next booth. When I got back, all of my orders were ruined and more had come in. Working in a kitchen is already stressful, and that was the last straw. I went to the back, started screaming, and kicked the hell out of the walk-in cooler. When I came back out, everyone was silent and avoiding eye contact, even the lady with the cup issue, though she still looked pretty pissed. I rushed through the orders, and thank God she left without saying anything else. I didn't get in trouble either since my manager had been serving and had to deal with her too. He understood. Story 9. I was in charge of a rollover trainer once at a military training site. Picture a Humvee mounted on an axle that spins, basically a simulated rollover accident. Part of the safety brief before anyone gets inside is to empty every pocket, take off anything on your belt, and remove anything sharp. We have rubber items inside to simulate debris flying around, and it's all for safety. Part of the training involves stopping the trainer on its side or roof so participants can practice helping each other and exiting the vehicle safely and quickly. It had been a long, boring, miserable day. It was hot, and like all good Army training, I was hungover and irritated. It was a group of officers, and none of them were listening. We stopped the exercise with the trainer upside down. Everyone got out except one officer who couldn't unbuckle his seatbelt. I opened the door, reached in to help, and put my hand right on a dual edge, 4-inch boot knife. I absolutely lost my head. I saw red, my ears burned, and I distinctly remember seeing another instructor mouth, "Oh crap." I chewed out every single officer there. Every one of them outranked me, and plenty outranked my commander. Didn't matter. I was the safety officer, and I went on a full tirade. When I finally turned around after unloading on them, my best friend was standing there, recording the whole thing on his phone. That bastard showed the clip for the rest of the week and for years afterward. I miss that jerk every day. Story 10. My son was maybe 8 months old, recently diagnosed as profoundly deaf. Deaf babies will often inhale sharply to feel the vibrations. It's one of the few ways they can stimulate their own senses. We were already on edge. I had just lost my job, our insurance was gone, and the cochlear implant surgery was going to cost us $170,000. We were looking at selling the house, one of the cars, everything. We were barely holding it together. We desperately needed a break, so my in-laws took us to the food court at the local mall. We sat down, trying to breathe for the first time all week, when our boy started doing his little inhaling gasping thing. And that's when I heard it. "He needs a beating," a fat 20-something said, not quietly, to her friends at the next table. I rarely curse in public and am generally non-confrontational, but that day, a stream of insulting profanity poured from my mouth for a solid 10 minutes, language that would have put a sailor to shame. I couldn't stop, and it verged on Bukowskian poetry. I insulted her, her mother, her weight, her pinched-faced friends, and then escalated. I railed on about her appearance, her life choices, and the utter absurdity of the world she represented. I told her F. Lee Ermey's Marine drill sergeant from Full Metal Jacket would have told me to tone it down. I explained that my son was deaf, that we couldn't stop his behavior, and that this was a goddamn food court in a small southern town filled with ignorant inbred hellspawn who embarrassed even normal troglodytes. The food court went silent, all eyes on us, and then it just kept going. Eventually, she got up and left crying. I can honestly say the entire rant was involuntary, like a pressure valve bursting. I had never done anything like it before, and I haven't since. I still feel bad for her to this day. Story 11, 7th frigging trip. To the DMV trying to reinstate my license. Every single time they scrutinize my paperwork, always managing to find something wrong, and sent me away to fix it. On this 7th trip, they finally told me, "You have no proof that you ever had a license, despite my piles of paperwork showing my driving record and everything else." I refused to leave the seat and said, "You people are friggin' monsters." A manager was called. We argued. He said he believed I had a license, but there was no proof, and he couldn't risk accepting my paperwork in case someone checked. I told him I wasn't leaving until I knew exactly what was needed. He finally said, "Tell you what, I can contact and get a verification that you had a license. It'll take 3 minutes." That's when I yelled in the DMV. "Why wasn't that the first thing you said?" Anyway, I got my license back. Story 12. In 6th grade, a group of 4 older kids basically claimed the back of the bus like it was their personal kingdom. I always minded my own business and tried to sit as far away from them as possible, not just because they were jerks, but because none of them had discovered basic hygiene. To make it worse, the bus driver was their quiet, retired grandpa who never told them to stop doing stupid crap. One day, they started a spitting war, literally spitting across the seats at each other while jumping around like feral animals. I was in the middle row trying to stay invisible. Then a giant wad of their disgusting spit nailed me square in the face. Something in my 6th grade soul snapped. I grabbed my massive Pearson history textbook, one of those heavy hardcover brick schools thought built character, and absolutely smashed the kid who spit on me over the head with it. And this was after telling them several times to knock it off. The spitting stopped immediately. The book cover cracked, and I had to pay for it at the end of the year, but honestly, 0 regrets. Story 13. I used to wait tables and never caused any drama. I was there to make money for my wedding. I showed up on time, didn't take smoke breaks, never used my phone, and rolled with the punches. 2 of the best compliments I've ever received came from my manager. Once, thanking me for not making him learn my fiance's name. I never caused problems like the other girls and didn't chit-chat. And another time, when all hell was breaking loose, he called me his calm little Hindu calf, which still makes me laugh. Anyway, this a-hole cook wouldn't stop calling me pet names and trying to touch me. Every time, I said loudly and clearly, "Don't touch me," and "My name isn't Sweetheart, it's Hopeful Kitty." Everyone knew how I felt and tried to tell me, "That's just how he is, let it go." I told them that the way I am is that I don't want him touching me. When the manager talked to him, he'd stop for a few weeks, then start again. After months, I told the manager that if it didn't stop, I was going to file a harassment complaint. The manager spoke to the RE owner and asked basically if they'd rather keep the cook or me, because I was on the verge of quitting. They agreed. They'd rather have me 100 times over that jerk. He was gone by the next day, and I got an escort to my car every night after that. Turns out, if you're drama-free and calm, people really listen when you have a problem. Story 14. Back when I was working retail, I was manning the returns desk when a woman came in to return 2 totes full of clearance clothes. She wanted to rebuy them all because the clearance prices had dropped. That's against the rules, so I explained why, but as usual, she got a manager, and the manager caved. Since she bought the items on 3 different receipts and mixed them all up, this transaction was going to take at least 30 minutes. I was frustrated, but hiding it well. About 15 minutes in, I heard commotion off to the side. I looked over and saw that her 5 or so completely unsupervised kids had piled onto a flat cart and were pushing it around. I don't know why it set me off so badly, but I pointed at them and yelled, raising my voice for the first and last time during my 10-year stint. The entire store went silent. The customer was so mad at her kids that she grabbed her stuff and left. A couple of coworkers said seeing me get angry was really unsettling. A blessing and a curse that comes with being the quiet one, I guess. Story 15. In healthcare, you get yelled at a lot for stupid stuff. "Where's my ginger ale?" "Screw that doctor, he's taking too long." But one patient crossed the line. She didn't like that I had called the previous hospital she was at the night before to get her records so I could see what was done. Completely legal. Done all the time to prevent mistakes or unnecessary repetition, and yes, she had signed a release. She came out of her room and threw a full styrofoam cup of urine at me. I dodged by a millimeter, but it ruined a computer monitor. Then she screamed, "Bish, I'ma leave here and mess up your family." That was it. I lost it. I screamed for security, and with the help of every tech and nurse in the emergency department, I personally put her back in her room, 4-point restrained her for being a danger to staff, and called the police. Once we got the records from the previous hospital, we discovered she had pulled the same stunt to a lesser degree the night before. After she was medically cleared, the police took her to jail. My final words as she was escorted out: "Good luck in the clink. They love the urinators there." She was charged with battery and given jail time for that, and multiple parole violations. Story 16. My friend and I were walking home from high school, sophomore year, I think. He kept lightly tripping me the whole way, and I kept telling him to knock it off. For context, I used to get picked on a bit, so maybe this was just the final straw stacked on top of a dozen other things. Right. Before we split to go our separate directions, he did the tripping thing one more time. That was it. I snapped. I swung my backpack at him. This was high school, so it had heavy textbooks, a lunch bag, probably half my locker in there. Here's where he really messed up. He was carrying a balsa wood bridge he had been building for a class. When I swung the backpack, he dropped it. I charged at him, but then I saw a better target. I could have kicked a 60-yard field goal. His poor little bridge exploded like it had been made of toothpicks and hopes. He just stared down at the scattered remains and said, in the most devastated voice, "You broke my bridge." I grabbed my bag, turned around and said something like, "I don't give a crap," and walked away like an action hero, leaving a fireball behind him. Fast forward 15 years, and he's one of my best friends. Story 17. I had a job filling vending machines in my mid-30s and was servicing one of our larger accounts we called full service, soda, snack, and cold food machines. Most customers, while on break, would come over and request certain items, which wasn't a problem. But there was one guy who took it too far. He was a 21-year-old know-it-all who would stand next to me during his break, constantly telling me how to do my job better and relaying complaints from other employees, most of which seemed made up just to give him something to say. One day, while I had the food machine door open checking the expiration dates on the milk, he kept interrupting me. "Don't miss the dates. Make sure there's an even number of chocolate and whole milk," and so on. I lost it. I stood up, got right in his face, not yelling, but loud enough for everyone around to hear. "Why do you always come over here and nug me while I'm trying to do my job? How would you like it if I went and started jumping up and down on the bed while your mom was trying to do her job?" He went beet red, looked like he wanted to hit me, and then just walked away. I immediately shut and locked all my machines and left. I called a good friend who was a supervisor and told him to expect a call because I was probably going to get fired. Never got the call. The kid, finally, left me alone. Story 18. I was a camp executive at my high school, responsible for the entire guys' side during our week-long camping trip. Quick backstory. There were 7 execs, 3 boys and 4 girls, in charge of about 140 students. The teachers had divided the girls' and guys' sides into colors to organize teams for the week's activities. Out of the 140 students, about 40 were leaders responsible for monitoring their respective teams, and the rest were campers. For the most part, the guys were pretty chill. Loud, sure, but following the rules. I don't mind a little noise as long as everyone is in their rooms when lights out hits, which is when no one should leave their cabin at night except to use the restroom. But then there was this one cabin, the purple team. Lord help me here. I kept getting noise complaints from the other leaders about the purple team's cabin to the point that the teachers were getting frustrated with us execs. If campers made too much noise, it was the job of the leaders to handle it. If they couldn't, the execs had to step in. If the execs couldn't, the teachers had to intervene, and nobody wanted that. I'd gotten multiple complaints from nearly every team, so I went to check it out. The second I stepped inside, it wasn't just loud. It reeked. A distinct, earthy smell filled the cabin. I flipped the hell out, not because I had a problem with drugs, but because if the teachers had come down on this, the trip would have been over before it even started. I don't think I've ever been that angry in my life. And after that, not a single noise complaint about the purple team for the rest of the week. Story 19. I'm generally extremely composed. 99% of the time, I have no idea how to express frustration or anger in public, so I just grin and bear it. When the following happened, I was about 19 or 20, awkwardly composed and very deferential toward authority, always ready to follow orders. At the time, I had a part-time job at a supermarket during college. We got a new manager who had landed the job through connections. His brother was pretty high up in corporate, The store steadily declined under his watch, held together only by employees who actually knew what they were doing. One evening shift, after months of BS, we were once again understaffed during the 5:30–6:30 post-work shopping rush. It was extraordinarily busy that evening, which made the situation even more stressful. Only 2 out of 4 possible cashiers were working their backs off to manage the ever-growing lines of increasingly frustrated customers. I was probably in the break room trying to grab a bite to eat after my afternoon shift when that absolute jerk of a manager was just lazing around, doing nothing. Meanwhile, I was constantly being called back to the floor to help customers the other 2 kids couldn't handle, all while the rest of the store, chores, questions, errands, was left completely unattended. The sheer incompetence and entitlement boiling in that room was beyond infuriating. At one point, as I returned to the break room, he asked me to do something. I don't even remember what. That was it. I snapped. I exploded, shouting loud enough for probably half the store to hear, in a way I never had before. I was yelling about how he just sat there reading the paper while too few people were trying to keep the place running. That he should haul him onto the shop floor and help us the hell out for once. Some light swearing might have been involved. Before he could respond, I stomped back out, put on my game face, and kept helping customers. I honestly can't recall if my once-in-a-lifetime outburst actually changed anything. Probably just shocked a few coworkers into realizing I was capable of flipping out. The manager likely pretended it never happened, but holy crap, it felt amazing. And let me tell you, it was a good day when that jerk was finally gone. Story 20. It was Halloween, and I was sitting out front watching my sister take my niece, around 4 years old, trick-or-treating. The people who lived above us in our maisonette decided it would be hilarious to shoot a firework at them. This is the only time I've ever completely lost my head. I got them inside the house and made sure they were okay. My sister had only a few minor burns on her arm and managed to shield my niece from the explosion. I was fuming. I went up to their door, banging on it and demanding they come out. When they didn't answer, I even started trying to kick the door in. My mom and brother had to drag me away and back inside to calm me down. Half an hour later, the police arrived because the neighbors had called them on me. Luckily, after we explained what had actually happened, I didn't get in trouble. Neither did they. But I still haven't forgotten it. Story 21. During a group project in the last year of high school, I had been feeling pretty depressed for a while. My emotions were locked away, boiling under the surface like some pressure cooker. 2 girls in our group decided the day before the presentation that it would be a great idea to do some kind of performance. I told them there simply wasn't enough time to practice. They got irritated that I wasn't on board and decided to call the teacher for a group meeting. During the meeting, I explained my thoughts and reasoning, but they decided to blame every problem on me, even though I had completed everything I was responsible for. The last thing they said was, "Don't sit there and feel sorry for yourself." And that was it. The pot finally boiled over. Every emotion I'd been stuffing down for months burst out all at once and came out as pure anger. I slammed my hand down on the table and probably let out a string of profanities they didn't actually deserve. It wasn't their fault I'd been feeling like crap for so long. It was just the wrong moment for them to push me. As I stormed out, I punched one of the tables hard enough that a piece of dried bubblegum fell off from underneath and hit the floor. Then I just kept walking. Behind me, the 2 girls burst into tears. My best friend was laughing his butt off, and the other 2 girls just sat there in complete shock. Sometime later, I apologized. But honestly, I'm weirdly grateful it happened. They managed to pull emotions out of me. Real emotions. Something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Story 22. A co-worker and friend had appendicitis and was rushed by ambulance from work. His appendix was at the point where it could have burst at any moment, an emergency situation. After work, a couple of us went to the hospital to visit him. We hadn't had any updates, so we had no idea how serious things were. We walk into the front entrance and no one is there. No receptionist, no wandering nurses, nothing. Just a phone on the counter with a sign. Pick up the phone and you'll be transferred to someone who can help. We pick up the phone and wait on hold for 10 minutes before anyone answers. They tell us he's in a certain part of the hospital, so we head over there. At the department, the receptionist says our friend isn't there. He's supposed to be in the ICU at a specific bed number. That's already worrying. He shouldn't need ICU. We get to the department and find the bed. And there's a very old, unconscious man lying spread eagle. My friend is 20. Definitely not him. We tell the nurse, and she can't find him in the system. No record of him being at the hospital at all. After making a few calls, she tells us he's in the ER. So we make the trek to the ER, hearts pounding the whole way. Another nurse tells us again that our friend isn't there and she has no record of him in the hospital. That's when I lost it. I yelled, not full-on screaming, I'm not a dance mom, but I was definitely not polite. All I wanted was to find my friend. I was genuinely worried, wondering if he was even alive. My friends started ushering me away, knowing things would only escalate further. I calmed down while they tried talking to the nurse, who offered zero help. We eventually found him, only because another passing nurse overheard us talking and happened to have worked on him. She led us to his room, where he was perfectly fine, just groggy from post-surgery recovery. The whole ordeal, the runaround, the constant uncertainty about whether my friend was okay, and the sheer incompetence of the staff pushed me over the edge. And to top it all off, the hospital staff stole a silver ring my friend had been wearing during surgery. Story 23. This is the story of how I got detained during the June 12th protests in Moscow last year. The protest took place on Tverskaya Street, a normally massive car-heavy street, but that day it was completely blocked and packed with people. Everything went surprisingly smoothly. We had a good time with friends, it was calm, and when the protest ended, we decided to head home. We turned off Tverskaya onto a smaller side street, went to a bar for a beer. It was all nice. We were happy no one had had any contact with the police. After wandering around a bit, we decided to finally go home. By then, the protest was over, but the Oman forces were still out in full force. On our way, I noticed a lone police officer. I approached him and asked if we could get to the nearest subway station. I could see it about 600 meters ahead, or if it was closed. He was polite and said it was fine, that we could go. I thanked him, turned right, and started walking toward the station. Then I saw 4 Oman guards marching down the street in a line. For some reason, I was about 4 meters ahead of my group. I guess I was just rushing to finally go home. That, I realize now, was a mistake. I tried to get out of their way and step onto the sidewalk, but they must have interpreted it as me trying to escape. Within seconds, 2 of them rushed me, kicked me to the ground, lifted me up, and dragged me to the side of a police bus. They rudely searched me, called me names, and then threw me into the bus. All of this happened with my girlfriend screaming at the top of her lungs behind me. I couldn't see her, but I could hear her terrified voice. The way they handled it, the sheer absurdity of the situation, it still pisses me off to this day. I wasn't even at the protest itself. I might have just been a random guy they decided looked suspicious because of my age. I had no flags, no posters, dressed completely neutrally, and just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. What happened next? I sat in that bus for about an hour, then we were taken to a police station on the other side of the city. We sat in the bus some more. There were about 10 people detained with me on the station grounds. Then came a good cop, bad cop routine for about 2 hours. Eventually, they released me. 3 months later, I got a fine of about $400 for participating in an unlawful protest, mailed to me. At least in the grand scheme, I didn't get beaten while inside. Story 24. My car broke down yesterday. I was stuck on the side of the highway on a bridge without an exact reference to my location. I called Roadside assistance, but they couldn't help because I didn't know my precise location. I ended up calling 911. They said an officer was on the way, so in the meantime, I called my insurance to try to get a tow truck. By this point, I'd been in my car for about 40 minutes, roasting and panicking. I finally got through and explained that I was on the side of the road, I was okay, but 911 was coming because I didn't feel safe. I said I just wanted to give them my location so my car could be towed. The lady on the phone asked, "Your guitar? You have to get your guitar?" I flipped. It was a mix of crying and yelling, and I shouted, "Are you serious? My car? My guitar?" This went on for a couple of minutes. I later apologized and explained that I was just scared, but seriously, yes, I'm broken down on the side of the road, and I need my guitar towed. Edit for clarification. I knew roughly where I was, just not the exact spot. I didn't call 911 because I was lost. I called so an officer could help since cars were getting too close, and it would be at least an hour before a tow truck could arrive. After I gave 911 my location, they helped me identify my exact mile marker. Even with that, insurance was still unable to help. I told the officer what I had told insurance, and he asked if I just wanted him to get a tow truck. I said, yes. Story 25. When I was in college, I was at a party with a bunch of friends. My friend Emma and I took a break from the chaos inside and went out for a smoke. I wandered over to a group of friends I knew, and Emma went off by herself to talk to other people. About a minute later, she came up and asked if she could bum a cigarette. I asked how she managed to finish so quickly since I was usually the first one done. She pointed to a guy and said he had knocked hers out of her hand and told her she was too pretty to smoke. I recognized him from earlier in the night. He was visiting one of the guys who lived in the house where the party was. The guy he was visiting was someone I liked to play beer pong with, so I decided to stay quiet and just gave Emma another cigarette. She came back shortly after asking for another cigarette. The guy had done it again, even though she wasn't trying to talk to him and was standing about 5 feet away. Emma was a close friend, and I'd had enough, so I went over and said, "Hey man, what's your problem?" He replied that smoking was bad for her, and he was just looking out. I told him, "Look, she's capable of making her own decisions. I know you're visiting Luke, and I like Luke, so I don't want any problems, but if you knock her cigarette from her hand one more time, we're going to have a problem." He backed off and left her alone for the rest of the night. I'm sure he thought he was flirting in a cute way, but he was just being a jerk. The next day, he found me and apologized, saying he was drunk and acting like an idiot. He also asked me to pass along his apology to Emma because he couldn't find her. Story 26. I was going to lunch with my best friend and his younger brother, who was going through a rough time and staying in a mental care facility. Since visiting hours that allowed us to pick him up and go somewhere were limited, I felt a responsibility to take him somewhere with a welcoming atmosphere so we could have a pleasant, enjoyable time, or maybe even a deep, positive conversation. The goal was to lift his spirits and give him hope again, especially since the staff at the facility had some questionable ideas about what was best for his healing process. But I digress. We went to the first place we came across, a casual American diner. It looked fine and wasn't busy at all. Great, this will work. We walked past a "Please seat yourself" sign, and the middle-aged waitress told us to sit wherever we liked. At that point, I realized we were a bit out of place. Two 30-year-olds and a guy in his mid-20s walking into a restaurant that was currently only serving people decades older than us. But that was fine. I'm friends with a bunch of people in their 60s and 70s, so I didn't feel uncomfortable. We looked for a booth and decided to head to the back, away from the occupied tables. As we approached a spot that seemed perfect for conversation, we heard, "And just where do you think you're going?" We turned around to see our waitress glaring at us with a suspicious, fiery sneer. "Oh, is this section not currently open?" I asked. "You can sit here," she said, gesturing to the booths next to us, "but you can't sit there." She was pointing at a large booth and table for big groups at the very back, about 10 feet from where we currently were. My adrenaline surged. It's one thing to be treated that way and preemptively accused of some minor infraction. But now I thought our chance of enjoying a meal at a friendly, mental health boosting place was pretty much gone. She left for the kitchen, and I was just thinking, what the heck? My inner mama bear was roaring. I turned to my friends and asked if they wanted to go. After a moment's hesitation, we all agreed that yes, we did. We got up and passed the waitress as she was heading back toward us with menus. One of my friends told her we were actually leaving. She looked confused and irritated. I told her that what she did wasn't cool, that we weren't even going to sit there, and said goodbye. So I guess I didn't actually lose my head that time, at least not outwardly. But I always aim to be kind, patient, and a good tipper to service staff. A personal life rule after too many embarrassing restaurant experiences with an older relative, so telling a server I didn't like what they did and walking out felt pretty extreme in comparison. We found another American restaurant about 10 minutes away that had the best food I'd eaten in ages, with the friendliest server we could ask for, and had a great time. Story 27. My neighbor across the street was a drunk a-hole. He would come home drunk and think it was funny to park on our side of the street, in front of our house, where my husband normally parks, forcing my husband to park in front of their house. Then his wife would come over and threaten to call the cops if we didn't stop parking there. One day, I was leaving for a school event with my young son, and the drunk neighbor parked in my husband's spot, stumbled out, and asked if I liked where he parked. I ignored him, but he started yelling profanities and laughing. When I got home later, I went across the street without my kids, only his daughter, my age, was home, and asked her to have her dad come talk to me because I did not appreciate his language in front of my children. The next day, his wife was outside raking leaves. She called me over and said she had heard I'd had words with her husband. I told her what happened. She replied that she would have told me to go F myself too. Then she started insulting me. I didn't react. She insulted my family. Still no reaction. Then she began attacking my children. My kids are special needs, and she called them messed up kids. Things turned Jerry Springer real fast. I knew a lot of her secrets, and I laid them all out at her feet. Every hidden affair of her husband, his alcoholism, the kids they had who hated her, all the things she thought nobody knew. I screamed every word from across the street, with the rest of the neighbors coming out to see what was happening. She was absolutely speechless. My husband had to drag me inside because he was afraid someone would call the cops. It's been 3 years, and she hasn't spoken to me since. She drops her eyes and walks the other way when she sees me. If I'm leaving or coming home when she is, she waits in her car until I'm in the house or gone. The drunk neighbor, on the other hand, apparently remembers nothing. He still regularly tries to make pleasant conversation with me at gas stations or wherever we happen to run into each other. Story 28. One of my friends had her best friend visiting from back home. He's a very unattractive gay Italian man. I'm not gay, but I usually don't mind being hit on by anyone. He started flirting with me, and I casually ignored it each time to show I wasn't interested. One night, a bunch of us were drinking, and as I walked past him, he slid his hand across my crotch. I kept walking, but shot him a what the hell stare. I figured the message was received. Then this past weekend, we were out again, and I had a little too much to drink. I started chugging water and decided to lie down for 10 minutes so I'd be able to get home safely. He apparently decided that was the perfect moment to reach for my junk again. A full slide along my balls and a grab at my shaft. It still boils my blood thinking about it. I yelled, "No, the next time you do anything like that again, I will knock you the hell out." I don't know if I would have reacted the same way if he didn't look like such a damn troll doll. Oh, and he also managed to make a mess on the toilet seat at the homestay we were at. I have no idea how anyone even does that, let alone leaves it there. I should have kicked his A for that alone. Story 29. I worked in a grocery store for a few years as a part-time office associate while in college. I never really had a problem with anyone there. If anyone gossiped about me behind my back, I didn't care. It never affected my work. I was still the manager of the front end, so I received respect from my cashiers, my customers, and everyone in every department. That is, until one day. Due to a sudden grocery store closing, we had a huge liquidation event starting on a Sunday. I was working that night. It was the busiest we had been in years. I did my best to complete everything that needed to be done while helping customers and assisting my fellow cashiers. All of it had to be finished before the store closed, which was 2 hours earlier than usual. I worked extremely hard through long lines. I put up the proper signs around the store, helped cashiers correct mistakes, assisted customers with very large money orders, and processed a ton of WEC checks. I handled complaints from people upset about certain items being sold out. I had to keep opening tills even after claiming them, because there were still tons of customers in the store 30 minutes before closing. I finally got everything counted and cleaned up around 45 minutes after closing. I had always worked Fridays and weekends, which were the busiest days. Parents were off with their kids, adults were getting groceries for the week, and young people were shopping for the weekend. I handled significantly more customers than office associates on weekdays, and the store totals reflected that. But on that Sunday, it was triple the usual amount. The morning office associate, who was 7 years younger than I, overlooked all my efforts the night before to keep the store, money totals, and office organized through the chaos. She texted me at 9 in the morning about a WIC check being entered as a MICR instead of a CVV. For those who don't know, a regular WIC check is considered a MICR, which includes milk, bread, formula, juice, beans, and similar items. A CVV is for fruits and vegetables. She asked why I entered it wrong. I told her it was just a mistake, and I knew the morning office staff could easily fix it on the computer. What really irritated me was that this particular associate always texted me about minor errors like this. Why is this register off by $3? Why is this bundle counted off? Why is there stuff on register 1? These were all things she could easily solve by asking someone working there or doing the math herself once she finished. She always messaged me while doing the morning work, not after the problem actually appeared. If there were any major issues, I always left a note. But that night, there weren't any, because I had already fixed everything that could have carried over from the chaotic evening. Of the 7 morning office associates, she was the only one who texted me about such simple things. She once told me I needed to focus on my job and leave all the stress at the door while I was in the process of moving. She told me I needed to pay attention to minor details when I was getting over a breakup with my boyfriend of 8 years. She even said I was being rude and didn't care about the store because of my mistake. Like what? I was there while the store was closing, giving it my all, and she was telling me I didn't care? All of my cashiers say hi when I come in and talk to me about what's going on in their lives. I chat with them, and I'm never rude to anyone who helps me. So what the heck is her problem? I lost it. Probably because I was on my cycle, but I was also upset that so many people, including my good friend who worked there, were losing their jobs. I told her she needed to stop texting me. I had done my best and she shouldn't be lecturing me. Her influx of customers was never as high as mine. I told her she acts like a flipping princess. No one says anything when she parks closer to the store than the rest of the employees. She refuses to get grocery carts when it rains and makes her cashiers do it. She chats with her boyfriend for half an hour on the clock when he comes into the store, ignoring guests and cashiers. She drinks iced coffee at her register when only water's allowed. She is constantly on her phone during work, in front of cashiers. She lies to managers about why she can't come to work at the last minute. And you're talking to me about not caring about the store because I entered one check as a MI car instead of a CVV on the busiest day we've ever had. I also told her she needed to choose her battles. I had held my tongue about all her policy-breaking habits because they weren't that big of a deal to me. It wasn't worth the trouble, and we had cameras anyway. I hardly worked with her while she was breaking the rules, and the manager on duty could handle it if needed. I told her she should know how to fix simple errors like that and keep moving. Don't text the closing office associate at 8:30 or 9 in the morning about minor mistakes when there are bigger problems to handle. We are on the same team. After that, I just blocked her number. I honestly think she was just jealous because I had a full-time job lined up before hearing about the store closing. I was already leaving. But what she said irritated me because I did care about everyone else and the people I'd worked with for so long. For Miss Blonde Princess to tell me I didn't care really rubbed me the wrong way. I always give 110% at any job I've had. For a 20-year-old to tell me to get it together over one minor mistake when she consistently gets away with things because she's a princess really ticked me off. Story 30. I had a fiancé who was a total narcissist. She was always right and always had the best and only way to do things. She was also extremely religious. Before we got engaged, I told myself that I loved her anyway and would accept who she was. I would accept that she would always be right and would always choose religion over me. But I figured that if I was ever 100% sure she was wrong, I could stand up for myself, and she would be mature enough to acknowledge it, if I kept it to once every few years. Nope. That summer, we had planned a weekend away months in advance. The day before we were to leave, she canceled because she was asked to give the prayer in Sunday school. She easily could have said she would be out of town. Anyone could have given the prayer. But instead, she canceled our trip to impress Jesus with her willingness to sacrifice anything for him. She eventually explained it to me this way. I knew it was going to hurt you, but it hurts me to hurt you. So the more you hurt, the bigger the sacrifice I'm making. Even though she didn't say it exactly like that, it was clear she meant more blessings in heaven. She also claimed she didn't owe any apology, as she had done nothing wrong. She wouldn't even admit to canceling a date because that was against her standards. It couldn't have happened since she would never do that. To make it work, she claimed she had never officially said yes to the date. When she planned where we could go to church on vacation, what we were eating, and our sleeping arrangements, that was only in case she decided to go with me. But it wouldn't be an actual commitment until we were in the car on our way. I stood up for myself, lost my cool, and told her I loved her. But I couldn't marry someone who would do that to me. We fought for 2 weeks. Then I told her we weren't going to recover since she would do it again. She didn't think what she did was wrong. She tried to gaslight me, mocked, and belittled me, and told me I was being dumped for mistreating a woman, only to immediately take it back when I readily agreed to the breakup. I stopped answering her calls and told her there was nothing left to be said, but she knew me better than anyone and used her body and my weakness to get me to forgive her. Even then, I only did it when she finally said she regretted what she had done. As soon as we kissed and made up, she changed her regret and apology to, "I'm sorry you had your feelings hurt, but I only regret that the cost was too high." That was completely different. It meant she didn't think I would stand up for myself and that she would do it again if I didn't lose my cool. I lost all respect for her that day. I thought I was marrying a mature, responsible person with a touch of narcissism. Instead, she behaved like someone out of control and showed me she had never once admitted being or doing anything wrong, and never would under any circumstances. We were back together, but that day, I decided I had to abandon 7 years and my best friend in the world to find someone better to marry. It was an outrageous idea since we had long established that she was the better person and was only putting up with me. We broke up, and she immediately met a guy and told me 3 weeks later that she was going to marry him. I cried and cried, but I knew I couldn't marry her. We got back together this year, 13 years after she divorced him. 6 weeks with her was long enough to confirm, from her stories of what a bad husband he was, and from her treatment of me, that I was right not to marry her. The poor guy had no clue what he had gotten himself into. He was just shocked that a pretty girl would let him see her unclad. She gave him a laundry list of his inadequacies every single day. Yet never once in 13 years of marriage did she admit to being wrong or apologize for anything. She belittled him in front of the kids and neighbors. She hit him and told him it was his fault for making her so angry. She threw massive tantrums. They fought from the moment she finally slept with him, and he could no longer pretend she was always right. I would have stood up to her and lost over and over again. He simply never tried. He stopped sleeping with her and turned to corn. Again, according to her, that was his fault. She did nothing wrong, like driving him away while refusing almost all normal intimate acts, calling them demeaning to the girl. She was shocked and disgusted that he would ask for something like a blowy, which she called evil, and blamed the corn for making him want more than once a month. I'd bet her next husband also develops a corn problem, totally unrelated to her religious aversion to anything intimate she considered filthy. She called me to brag that her new fiancé agrees with every single opinion she has before she even has it. Such compatibility. I wanted to tell her she was dating a rich people who had never had such a pretty girl talk to him and would do anything to sleep with her. Once the honeymoon is over, he will also start realizing she isn't perfect. I understand this story is relatively tame. I have since dated alcoholics and people with manic depression and have much more interesting stories. But this girl was supposed to be a cut above those types she despised. I wonder how she would feel knowing I honestly think they were better people overall than she is. Jesus will have mercy on a struggling alcoholic. The only people he despised were the rule followers who would happily hurt others to show off how religious they were. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.